All right, then without further ado, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before the committee today. The American people have entrusted us with great responsibilities. One of those responsibilities is outlined in Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution, which calls for a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money to be published from time to time. That is what you set out to do in this committee. Yet there are two problems that I, and I believe most Americans, have noticed in this regard. First is that while we are called upon to publish a federal budget, unlike those we represent, the Congress does not often balance that budget. Despite attempts to rein in federal spending, our national debt has continued to skyrocket to well over $18 trillion. It was Thomas Jefferson who warned us of the consequences of out-of-control debt when he wrote, "To preserve the independence of the people, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make an election between economy and liberty, or profusion and servitude." Experience has proven time and again that Congress cannot, for any significant length of time, rein in excessive government spending. The annual deficits and the resulting debt continue to grow due to political pressures and dependency on government programs. In order for Congress to be able to consistently make the very tough decisions necessary to sustain fiscal responsibility over the long term, Congress must have an external pressure to force it to do so. For this reason, I have introduced balanced budget constitutional amendments every Congress since the 110th. While I appreciate this committee's work in the past to produce budgets that balance in the future, I believe it is time that we make an institutional reform to ensure that all Congresses, regardless of political party control, produce budgets that consistently balance. I would encourage this House Budget Committee to consider adding as a provision to your report language that recommends that Congress propose a balanced budget constitutional amendment to the states for ratification. The second point I'd like to raise is that of revenues. Not only do the American people expect us to spend their hard-earned tax dollars responsibly, they also expect that we collect those revenues fairly, simply, and in a way that does not hurt job growth. While the authority for tax reform falls under the jurisdiction of the House Ways and Means Committee, it is important that this committee also recognize the need for fundamental tax reform so that the revenue side of our federal budget is representative of a fair, simple tax system that does not penalize marriage or families and instead promotes job growth, supports savings and investment, and applies a low tax rate to all Americans and tax relief for working Americans. I have introduced legislation in this Congress that would invite lawmakers to have this debate. The Tax Code Termination Act has twice passed the House of Representatives in the 105th and 106th Congresses and simply puts a date certain on the expiration of our current tax code and with a simple structure directs Congress to establish a new tax system before that expiration. It's my hope that this committee will include support for fundamental tax reform in the House fiscal year 2016 budget. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today, and I look forward to working with you to create sustainable budgetary policies that the American people support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the Chairman for his not only his testimony, but his consistent work over a long number of years on the theme of a balanced budget. But I see we